Welcome back to the Simulator series. In today's episode, we are going to be scripting the achievement system. As always, if you guys do enjoy the video or it does help you out, make sure you smash the like button, also the subscribe button, and turn post notifications on so you're notified every time I upload a brand new episode. Of course, I also have a Patreon if you guys like to support me and gain access to all the scripts and the game file that I made during this episode. There's a link down below in the description, and you guys are going to check that out. With that being said, let's hop right into it. Now, to start scripting, let's start off by creating a config file for all of our achievements. So we're going to go inside of the replicated storage, inside of the configs folder, and add a brand new module script to this. We'll then rename that module script to be called achievements, and then we can also update our module variable inside of here as well. Now we'll begin by creating the config variable. So we're going to create a brand new variable called config, which is going to be equal to a blank table. Now inside of this table, we're going to have a couple of different categories. So for instance, we'll have an eggs category, and what this category is going to be set to is another table. Now this table is going to be an array of all of the different achievements in this specific category. So we'll create another table, and inside of this table, we'll start adding some properties which are specific to each of our different enchantments. So we're going to add an ID property, which is going to be equal to a string, and for this ID, we're going to set this to basic egg. We'll then add another property, which is actually going to be called egg, and this is going to be the specific egg that the player has to open to complete this achievement. And the egg that we're going to be using is going to be the basic egg. We'll then add another property called amount, which is going to be how many times the player has to actually do this objective to complete the achievement, and we're going to say 5. And then we're going to add the reward property, which is again going to be equal to a table. And inside of here, we're going to have a type property, which is going to be the type of reward that we're actually going to give to the player, and I'm going to set the type to be custom. We'll add one more property here, which is going to be called description, and that's going to be set to a string, and this string is basically just going to be visibly displayed to the player to tell them what they actually receive from completing this achievement. So for this reward, we're going to say plus 10 pet storage. So in our game, if the player hatches 5 basic eggs, they'll complete this achievement, and their reward will be able to store an additional 10 pets. Now if we want to, we can add a second achievement to the eggs category. So what we can actually do is add a comma right here, and then we're going to go ahead and copy and paste this, and we can create our second hatching achievement. Now when it comes to the ID property, it doesn't exactly matter too much. The most important thing about the ID property is that none of the IDs of any of the quests should ever be the same. The reason that I actually decided to include an ID property inside of each of the individual achievements is because in the future, if you ever want to come in and add more achievements or delete any of the past achievements, handling it this way, the player will never lose their data. Now there's many other ways that you can handle it without actually adding this ID property, and one of the downfalls when it comes to handling it that way is that if you decide to add a new achievement, let's say between an achievement that a player has already completed, then depending on your system, the data might not be correct and the player might not actually be able to even see that achievement. So by adding the ID property every single time and then also setting the ID for all the individual achievements, that pretty much guarantees that the player's data works exactly as it should, no matter if we take away any of the achievements or add any more. Anyway, for the second egg achievement, we're going to actually require the player to open up the Arctic egg. So for our ID, we're going to set this to Arctic egg. Again, like I said, the ID doesn't really matter. It just needs to be different than all of the other IDs. So yes, I could actually set this ID to egg 2, and I could set this ID to egg 1. The ID is never visually displayed to the player, and it's pretty much only used to guarantee that the data is persistent. So that's why when it comes to naming the specific ID, it doesn't exactly matter what you name it. It just needs to be different than all of the other IDs. Anyways, now that we've updated the ID as well as the egg, let's go ahead and update the amount. We're going to require the player to hatch 7 Arctic eggs to complete this, and then for this reward, we'll give the player plus 25 pet storage. And also, the reason that we're making an array here is because with an array, we're actually able to keep the order of how we created the table. So for instance, this is the first achievement in this category that the player is going to get. After the player completes this achievement, then they'll be able to actually start working on this achievement next. Now, let's go ahead and actually add another category and some achievements in that category. The next category that we're going to create is going to be called clicks, and that's going to be set again to another table. Inside of this table, we'll create another table, and then we'll start creating our achievement. So the ID of this is going to be clicks 1. Now, this is not going to have an egg property because this achievement does not require the player to hatch any eggs. Instead, we'll set the amount property, which is going to be equal to 5. We'll then also set the reward property, which again is equal to a table, and then inside of this table, we'll specify the type of it, which is going to be custom, and for the description, we're actually going to set this to plus 10% click multiplier. Okay, cool, so there we go. We've created another category of achievements, and we've created one of our achievements inside of here. I'm going to create one final category. I'll actually just copy and paste the clicks table, and then we'll rename this to be called islands, and now this category of achievements is going to require the player to actually reach the different islands. So for the ID of this one, we're going to say islands 1. Below this, we'll actually set the island property, which is going to be set to forest, so the player has to reach the forest island to complete this achievement. We're actually going to remove the amount property from this because of course the player only has to reach it one single time. And for the reward of this, we're actually going to set the type to be currency. We'll then remove the description property, and we'll add a currency property to this, and we're going to reward the player the clicks currency. And then we'll add an amount property to this, and we'll set that to 500. So now the player is rewarded 500 clicks whenever they complete this achievement. Now let's actually go ahead and create some types for for the data that we just created to make this a lot easier to understand. So we're going to create a type called achievement config, which is going to be equal to a table. Now what this achievement config type refers to is actually this table right here, or this table right here. So the individual achievements themselves. So every single achievement has an ID, which is a string. They also always have a reward property, which for right now, we're just going to set the type of that to be a table. Now, of course, we have some additional properties inside of here, but all of these other ones are optional. So the first property that we'll add here is the amount property, which is a number. Like I said, it's optional, so we'll put a question mark there. We then have the egg property, which is a string, and that's optional as well. And we also have the island property, which again is a string, and that's optional as well. Now that we've created that type, let's go ahead and create another type, which is actually going to be the achievement reward type. And what this type actually refers to is a reward table inside of each of the achievements. So the first property that we actually have here is type, which for right now, we're just going to set that to string. And that's the only guaranteed property that we actually have. Now after that, we have a couple of optional properties. The first one is amount, which is a number, and it's optional, so let's put a question mark there. We then also have the currency, which for right now, we're just going to say is a string, and that's optional. And then we also have the description as well, which is also a string, and that's optional as well. Now that we've created that type, we can actually use it by going inside of the achievement config type and setting the type of the reward property to the achievement reward, just like that. And now above the achievement reward type, we can create another type, which is actually going to be called reward type. Now the reward type is either going to be a string, which is currency, or custom. And when is this type going to be used? It's going to be used inside of a reward table, and we're going to set the reward type to the type of the type property. Now above the reward type, we can also create another type, which is going to be called currency. Now the currencies that we're going to be able to reward to the player are going to be clicks, gems, and rebirths. And now that we've created that type, let's go ahead and actually use it. And again, we're going to use that inside of the reward table, and we're going to set the type of the currency property to the currency type, just like that. Now that we've created all these types, let's actually set the type of the config variable right here. So we'll set the type of this equal to a table. Now inside of the table, we're going to have strings for keys, and the values are actually going to be the achievement config. Cool. So now that we set the type of that, when we start interacting and scripting with the config variable, Studio will be able to autocomplete a lot of our code. Let me show you, for example. We'll go ahead and add another achievement to the clicks category. So I'm going to start typing out the ID property, and we can see that's automatically suggested to us right here. So what is the ID going to be? Well, we'll say clicks 2. We'll then start typing out amount, and we can see that amount pops up right there, and that's a number, so we'll set this to 10. Then we can start typing out reward, and we can see the type of that as well. So we'll say reward equals, and now inside of here, we can start typing out some properties. So we'll say type equals, and we'll actually set this to a currency. Then we have to use the currency property, and we'll set that to either of these currencies right here, but we'll go ahead and go with gems. Don't forget your comma up here, and then your comma down there. And then we also want to specify the amount as well, which we'll actually just set that to 1000. Cool, so there we go. We now have a couple of different achievements created, and we have the types created for them as well to hopefully help give you a better understanding of how our achievements are structured. Anyways, next what we'll do, below where we created the config variable, we're actually going to say achievements.config equals the config variable, and now we can create some functions in here that's going to be shared by all the scripts which require this module. So we'll first start off by creating the getIndexFromID function, which is going to accept a group, which is a string, and an ID, which is also a string as well. Now what we're actually going to use this function for is getting the specific index of an achievement inside of the categories array based on the specific ID property. So what we're going to do is loop through the specific group table inside of the config. So we're going to say for index, comma, achievement info in config, and then index that with the group. Then what we want to do is we want to check if the achievement info.id is equal to the ID that we passed through to here. And if it is, then we're simply just going to return the index to that. Awesome. Now that we've created that, let me actually fix the name of this. It should be called getIndexFromID. So I just had to correct that misspelling real quick. Then we'll create another function. This function is going to be called getAchievementConfig. And this is again going to take the group, which is going to be a string. And now for our second argument, we're going to call this index. But with how we're going to set this function up, the index can either be a number or it can be a string, because index doesn't just refer to index, it also refers to the ID as well. So when we use this function, we can actually pass through either the index or the ID, and we can still get the achievement config directly from that. So the first thing we'll do is we'll say index equals. And now what we want to do with this variable is if we call this function and we actually pass through an ID, then we want to actually convert the ID to an index. Now, how can we tell if the index argument passed to this function is actually an ID? Well, indexes are always numbers, whereas IDs are always strings. So instead of figuring out if the index is a string, instead, we'll actually check if index is a number. So we'll say if toNumber index, then. And now we're actually using the toNumber function on the index argument. And we all know what this function does. It returns a number if the value passed inside of it can actually be converted into a number. And with this function, we can actually use it to basically check if a variable is a number or not. So what we're saying here is basically if the index is a number, then the index is just going to stay the index. Otherwise, we're going to use our getIndexFromID function that we just created, pass through the group as well as the index, and that's how we're going to get our index variable so that this function works with both IDs and indexes. Now you might see an underline here, and that's because of the type. This function requires the type to be a string, but when we pass the index variable into this function, inside of this function, index can be a number or a string. Now, although how our if statement is set up, we're guaranteeing that when we call this function, we're actually passing through a string. Roblox Studio isn't smart enough to realize that or figure that out, so that's why it's going to give us red underline here, but you can ignore this because it's going to be perfectly fine. Anyways, after we set the index, we'll create a new variable called config, which is going to be set to the config, and then we want to index the config with the group, and we also want to index that with the index as well. Now, like I just explained with this red underline, the same thing applies to here as well. Index might be a string or it might be a number. Roblox Studio isn't 100% sure, but I'm 100% sure, so we can ignore that. Now, if we're not actually able to find the config, then we want to stop the function right there. And also, it looks like I spelled achievements wrong. For some reason, achievements is a bad word for me, and I'm not good at spelling it. So throughout this video, the word achievements might be misspelled a couple of different times. More than likely, I'll show myself fixing them, but just make sure you spell the word achievements right, or that could possibly be your issue. Anyway, after we verify that we actually got a config, what we're then going to do is basically set or update the default properties which are not always included on specific achievements, but we still use that value while scripting. So I'll give you an example. We're going to say if not config.amount, then. So if any of our achievements don't actually have the amount property, which currently is only a thing for the island achievements, what we're going to do is actually add this property to there, and we're going to set that to 1. Now you might be thinking, what is the point of this? Why would we even do that? When scripting our system out, considering 99% of our achievements actually have the amount property, it's super common to use this property while scripting. But now if some achievements don't have this property, then we can run into some issues. Now realistically, when it comes to the island achievements, we could simply just add the amount property here and just set it to 1. That's not hard at all. But let's just say that we had 20 different island achievements, and the value of the amount property is literally always the same. It's always 1. So why would we waste our time typing that property out for every single achievement when we know by default that we're always going to want the value to be 1? So that's why we're going to add that property here instead of setting it for all the achievements which we already know the value is going to be 1 for. And finally, after we set that value, we can finally return the actual config variable. Cool. So after we've created that function, we're going to create another one. This one is going to be called getAchievementProgress, which again is going to accept a group as well as an ID, both being strings. And then finally, we'll accept the player's data as well. And this function is going to return a number. Now this function is actually really simple. We're going to say return, then we'll go into the player's data. Inside of the player's data is going to be a table called achievements. And inside of here, we're going to index that with the specific group. And then we'll index that table with the specific ID. And then finally, we'll return the progress property of that table. Now this might be a little bit confusing for you because we didn't go over how we're actually setting the player's data up. So if it is confusing for you, you can ignore it for now. Don't worry, it should make more sense shortly. But anyways, we're going to create another function. This one's going to be called getFirstAvailableAchievementIndex. Again, this will accept the group, which is a string, but we don't need to accept an ID. Instead, we again need to accept the player's data. Now, I'm going to put a comment above this function just to always remind everybody of exactly what this function does, because the name of the function is a little bit misleading, but I could not think of a better name for it. So what this function actually does is it returns an incomplete or unclaimed achievement. So if the player has completed an achievement, but they haven't claimed the reward from it yet, then this function will return that unclaimed achievement, even though it's already been completed. And if you're confused at all as to why we would want that, you'll definitely see as we're scripting the GUI. Anyways, we'll start this off by looping through all of the achievements in that specific group. So we're going to say for index, comma, underscore, because we're not actually going to use the value here, in config, and then index that with the specific group, do. We'll then create a variable called config, which is going to actually be equal to achievements.getAchievementConfig, and we'll pass through the group as well as the index. We'll then go ahead and get the player's progress for completing the specific achievement. And how can we do that? Well, we'll literally say achievements.getAchievementProgress. We'll pass through the group, we'll pass through the config.id, and then we'll also pass through the player's data as well. Now also, go into the getAchievementConfig function. We actually want to set the return type of this, and we want to set that to the achievement config with a question mark because we might not always return the achievement config here. The config could possibly be nil. That's why we have to add a question mark there. Anyway, going back down to our get first available achievement index. Now that we've got the progress, let's go ahead and create a variable for if it's completed or not. So is completed. So for it to be completed, the player's progress would have to be greater than or equal to the config.amount. And then we can also create a variable for if it has been claimed or not. So local is claimed equals, and this time we're going to say data, then go into the player's achievements table, and then we're going to index this with the group, and then we'll index this with the achievement ID. And then we want to get the claimed property from this instead of the progress property. So of course, if the claimed property is set to true, then is claimed would be true, meaning that the player has already claimed their reward for this. Now that we've created all those variables, let's go ahead and check if the achievement has been completed and the player has not actually claimed the achievement yet. Now, if this is true, then we're going to return this index because the player hasn't claimed this achievement yet. So we want to give them the opportunity to do that. Now, if it is completed and it's already claimed, or it's just not even completed, then we want to check if it has not been completed yet. And if it has has not been completed yet, then again, we're going to return the index. And that's all we have to do inside of this function. Once again, this function is going to give us the first incomplete or unclaimed achievement from the group passed to it. Now, go into our get index from ID function. We're actually going to go ahead and copy and paste this, and we're going to actually rename one of these to get ID from index. So basically the opposite. Now, of course, with this function, we're going to update the ID. We're not going to accept the ID. We'll actually accept the index, which is going to be a number this time. And instead of looping through anything, what we're actually going to do is create a variable called config, which of course is going to be equal to achievements.getAchievementConfig, and we'll pass through the group as well as the index. And if we don't get the config, then we want to stop the function right there. Otherwise, we actually just want to return the config.id. Cool, so now we have two useful functions, one for converting the index to the ID, and the other for converting the ID to the index. Next, what I'm going to do is basically just copy and paste this line of code right below it. So now we have another function, but we're going to rename this. And all we're going to do is replace the word index with the word ID. Now we'll still be taking the group and we'll still be taking the player's data. Inside of here though, we're going to create a variable called index, which is going to be equal to achievements.getFirstAvailableAchievementIndex. And we're going to pass through the group as well as the player's data. And then we're simply just going to convert it. So we're going to say achievements.getID from index, and then we'll pass through the group as well as the index, and then we'll return it just like that. Okay, cool. And with all that being said, we're done with the achievements config for now, but we will come back to this in the future, so I'm going to leave this open. Anyways, what we can get started with next is actually updating the player's data. So we're going to go inside of the replicated storage, inside of the player data folder, and open up the template module script. Inside of here, we of course want to get the achievements config, so let's go ahead and grab that. There we go. We now have a variable for that, and then we're just going to go ahead and copy and paste one of our most recent tables. Then, towards the top of our script, we're going to create a brand new variable called default achievements, which is going to be set to a blank table. Then we're going to loop through the achievements config, so for group, achievements in achievements config.config do. Now we'll index our default achievements table with the specific group and set that equal to a brand new table. Then after we've done that, let's go ahead and actually loop through all of the achievements. So we're going to say achievement info in achievements do. And now indexing the default achievements table with the specific group, we'll then index this table with the specific achievement info.id, and we're going to set that equal to a brand new table. And inside of this table, we'll store two properties. The first property is going to be called progress, which by default is going to be set to 0. And the second property is going to be called claimed, which by default is going to be set to false. And now we've created the player data. So of course, anytime the player progresses with the specific achievement, we'll update the progress player data right here for each of the individual achievements. And then whenever the player actually claims the achievement, we'll update this property as well. Anyways, now that we've created all that data, let's go ahead and actually add it to the player. So we'll come down here, we'll say achievements, and we'll set that to our default achievements table that we just created. Cool. Now to continue along with the player data, let's go ahead and actually add some networking to this, and then we can update our state manager. So going inside the replicate storage, inside the remotes folder, we're going to add a brand new remote event, and we're going to rename this one to update achievement. Now we also want to add a second remote event, and instead of calling this one update achievement, we're going to call this claim achievement. So now we added in two remote events, update achievement and claim achievement. And now that we have those remote events added, let's go ahead and actually update the client state manager. So going inside the replicated storage, inside of the client folder, we'll open up the state module script. Inside of here, we can go all the way down towards the bottom of the script, and we can even copy and just paste the last one if we wanted to. This time we'll be using the update achievement remote event, and the arguments for this are of course going to be different. The argument though that we're going to get is going to be the group. We'll also get the ID, which is going to be a string as well, and then we'll also have an amount argument, which is going to be a number. And the amount argument is basically going to tell us the progress that the player has for the specific achievement. So now to update the player's data on the client side, we're going to go inside of the player data table, inside of their achievements table, and then we want to index that table with the specific group, and then we want to index that table with the specific ID, and then we want to set the progress property of that equal to the amount argument that's passed to this function. Now that we have that created, let's go ahead and copy and paste it, and this time we'll script out claiming the achievement. So again, we'll get the group and we'll get the ID. We won't get the amount though, and all we're going to do is we're going to say .claimed equals true. So anytime the player claims the achievement, similar to how we handled the progress, we just have to set the claim property of that specific achievement to true. Cool, so now all the networking has been added. We can exit out of the client state manager, and also the player data has been created as well. So we can exit out of the template module script as well. Next, what we'll begin doing is actually scripting the GUI itself. So we'll go inside of the start player, inside of the start player scripts, inside of the GUI folder, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the pet index script. You can duplicate whichever script you want. I just like to get all those basic variables already created for us so we don't have to waste our time typing them all out. Anyways, I'm going to rename this to achievements, and then I'm going to go ahead and open the script up. Now inside of the script, we do not need the starter GUI variable. We do need the players and the replicate storage. We also need the player and the player GUI. We also want the remotes, but the remotes variable should just be set to the remotes folder, not the pets folder inside of there. Now when it comes to these modules, we don't need most of them. We do need the state manager, we do need the format number, and then we should also get the achievements config as well. So let's go ahead and grab that, configs.achievements, achievements config. Okay, there we go. We then have our GUI variable, which should actually be set to the achievement screen GUI, and then I'm going to delete everything else in the script. Okay, so now that we have the GUI, let's go ahead and create a variable for the frame. So GUI.frame. We'll then create a variable for the container, which is inside of the frame, so frame.container. We'll also create a variable for the template, which is inside of the container, so container.template. And then we also have the exit button, which is inside of the frame, so frame.exit. Now, apart from just this GUI, we also need to get another GUI in here, and that's our left GUI. And that's actually this left GUI over here where we have all of our buttons stored inside of. So what I'll do is I will copy and paste this variable. Instead of it being called GUI, we'll actually call this button GUI. And the name of the child that we're going to be waiting for is called left. And then we'll create a variable for the open button. So that's going to be inside of the button GUI, inside of the frame, inside of the buttons frame. And then we want to actually get the rewards image button. And cool, we now have a variable for that. Now the way that we're going to start off is kind of reverse because I feel like we always script the buttons at the end, but we'll just simply script the buttons at the beginning this time because we have the open button. So I feel like we just might as well. So to start scripting buttons, we're going to say open button dot mouse button one click. We're going to connect that to an anonymous function. And what do we want to do? Well, we're just going to set the enable property of the GUI to the opposite of what it currently is. So this will both open and close it depending on if the GUI is open or closed already. We can then go ahead and actually copy and paste these lines of code. And this time for the exit button, what we're going to do is actually set the enable property to false every single time. Okay, that was pretty straightforward. Now we have opening and closing the GUI. Next, we'll create a function called create base achievements. And how we're going to handle the GUI is with our template, we're basically going to clone the template for every single category of achievement. So remember our achievement groups, we had the clicks, the islands, and the eggs. And for how we want to display them in our GUI, we only want to display one achievement from each of those groups at a single time. So we're basically going to clone and create one template for each of the different groups. Now to be able to do this, the first thing we want to do is actually loop through the config. So we're going to say for group, comma, achievements in achievements config dot config do. We'll then create a variable for the achievement index. And what we'll do here is use the get first available achievement index function. We'll pass through the group as well as the state manager dot get data. And again, this is going to return to us the first achievement that the player has not claimed or they've not completed yet. Then we can go ahead and actually clone the template. So we're going to say template clone. We'll then parent the clone to the container. We'll then set the visibility of this, and the visibility of this is going to be based upon the achievement index. If there is no achievement index, then that means that the player has completed all the achievements in this specific group. So we won't want this template to actually be visible. Then we'll set the name of this equal to the group. Now, the name of this function is create base achievements. So we're not actually going to update all of the specific things of the template inside of this function. We're just basically going to do what's necessary. So the next necessary thing is listening for that claim button to actually be clicked. So to get to the claim button, we want to go inside of the clone, inside of the bottom frame, inside of the progress frame, and inside of there will actually contain the claim text button. Now we want to listen for that to be clicked, and whenever that's actually clicked, what do we want to do? Well, we want to fire off that claim achievement remote event. So we're going to say remotes.claim achievement fire server, and all we need to actually pass through is the group of the achievement that we're trying to claim. Okay, and that's pretty much all we're going to do with this function for right now. After we've created that function, let's go ahead and actually call it down here. So create base achievements, just like that. And that's going to go through each of the achievement groups and basically create a template for each of them. Now above that function, we're going to create another function, which is actually going to be called update achievement. This is going to accept a group, which is going to be a string, as well as an index, which is going to be a number. And the first thing we'll do inside of here is actually get the achievements config. So of course, achievements config dot get achievement config, and we want to pass through the group as well as the index. Then after that, we want to actually find the clone inside of the container. So container find first child, and then we want to look for the child named after our group. Also, I messed up the function name. It should be a capital A right there. So there we go. Now that we actually have the template for the specific group, we're going to start updating a lot of the elements of the specific template. So we'll first start off by updating the title text label. We're actually going to create a variable called title text. And now how we're going to set this is based off the group. If the group is eggs, then we want to actually set this string to be config.egg. And then after that, we want to display the word eggs. So for instance, this text would say something like forest eggs or basic eggs or starter eggs and so on. Now otherwise, we would set this string to display the group and then hashtag next to the index number. So what this string would actually display is something like islands number 1, islands number 2, or clicks number 1, clicks number 2. So the title is mostly based on the group unless the group is eggs, then it'll just display the actual egg along with the word eggs at the end. Now that we have that string, let's go ahead and actually update the text label. So we're going to say clone.title, and remember that title is just a title frame. Inside of that title frame, we have a title text label, and we're going to set the text that equal to the title text, and after the title text string, we're going to include an exclamation mark just like that. Now that we've updated the title text, we also need to update the objective text as well. So let's go ahead and create a variable for this objective text. Now, if the group is eggs, then we're going to set the objective text variable to open config.amount space config.egg space eggs. So this would say something like open 5 forest eggs. Now, after that, we're going to copy and paste this because we now want to use an else if statement here. This time we want to check if the group is clicks. Now, if the group is clicks, then we're going to say click, then the amount, and then the word times. So click 500 times. We'll then copy and paste that. This time we'll check if the group is equal to islands. And if it is, then we'll say discover config.island, and then we'll say the word island. So discover forest island or discover Arctic island. You could also say discover the forest island or discover the Arctic island. It all depends on your preference. Anyways, now that we've gotten the objective text, let's go ahead and actually set that. So inside of the clone, we have the objective text label, and we'll set the text of that equal to the objective text, and then after the objective text, we'll also include an exclamation mark there as well. Next, let's go ahead and create a variable for the player's progress. So progress equals achievements config that get achievement progress, and we'll pass through the group as well as the config.id and the state manager.getData. And we'll create a variable called goal, which is going to be equal to config.amount. We'll then also create a variable for the progress frame, which is equal to clone.bottom, and then that progress frame inside of the bottom frame. Next, we'll create a variable for the progress text. Now, how we're going to set this is going to be based off the config.amount. So if the amount equals 1, then we're going to set this equal to not done. Otherwise, this string is going to display the progress separated by a slash and then the goal as well. So for example, this would be 50/100. And now that we have the variable set, we'll go inside of the progress frame. Inside of the progress bar, we have the amount text label, and we're going to set the text of that equal to the progress text. Now we can copy and paste this line because once again, we want to go to the progress bar, but this time we actually want to update the size of the progress frame inside of the progress bar frame. And we're going to set that to udim.to from scale. And we're going to divide the progress by the goal. And for the y, we're going to set that to 1 as it normally is. Then we're going to copy and paste this one more time. And this time we actually want to set the visibility of this. And we only want to make the progress of the progress bar visible if the progress is greater than 0. So basically, if the player has actually made any progress towards completing this. We'll then create a variable called isCompleted, which of course is going to be equal to the progress is greater than or equal to the goal. So now if this achievement is actually completed, then we want to display the claim reward button to the player. So we're going to set the visibility of the progress bar to not is completed. So the progress bar will only be displayed if the achievement has not been completed. Now we also want to do the same thing for the title text label inside of the progress frame as well. We want to set the visibility of that based on if the achievement has not been completed. Then finally, inside of the progress frame, we also have the claim button, and we only want to make this visible if the achievement has been completed. Cool, so now that we've gone through the entire progress frame, next we actually have the reward frame, which of course is going to be equal to clone.bottom.reward. Then we can create a variable for the reward text. Now the text of this is going to be based off the type of reward of the achievement. So we're going to say if config.reward.type equals currency, then. So if the type of reward is actually a currency, then what we're going to do is we're going to set the reward text equal to plus format number.format compact, and then we want to format the config.reward.amount. So the text would say something like plus 500, for example. After that, we then want to check if the type is equal to custom. And if it is custom, then we just want to set the reward text to the config.reward.description. Cool, and now that we have the reward text, we can go inside of the reward frame, we can go inside of that background frame, and then we have that string text label, and we can set the text of that equal to the reward text. Now we're not only going to set the text of the string text label, but we're also going to set the text of the number text label to the reward text as well. Now this might seem really odd for you, but don't worry, you'll realize why we're doing this in just a minute. Now in addition to setting the text for these text labels, we also want to update that icon image label as well. So if the config.reward.type equals currency, then we'll create a variable inside of here called reward image. And now if the config.reward.currency equals clicks, then the reward image is going to be set to a string. And how are we going to get these images? Well, we're going to go inside of our asset manager, we're going to go inside of images, and then we can go ahead and grab our images. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that right there. We can then copy and paste this. This time we're going to say else. This time we'll say else if reward the currency equals gems. And if the currency equals gems, then we're going to use our gem currency icon just like that. And then finally, if it's neither of those two, then we're going to go ahead and use the rebirth icon instead. So there we go. Cool. So now that we've picked our image, we then want to go ahead and actually update that icon image label. So we're going to say reward frame dot background dot icon dot image equals reward image. Cool. Now after we set the image, what we're then going to do is set the visibility of the icon image label and the string and number text labels. So we're just going to go ahead and copy and paste this. And we'll say dot visible equals config dot reward dot type equals currency. So we only want to display the image icon label if the type of the reward is actually a currency. We can then copy and paste it. This time we're going to say dot number. So this is the number text label. And again, we only want to display this if the type of the reward is currency. Then we can copy and paste this one more time. And for the string to actually be visible, the type of the reward has to actually not be currency. So we only want to make the string text label visible if the reward is not a currency. Otherwise, we want to display the image as well as the number text label. And because we set the visibility just like this, that's why it's fine for us to set both these text labels to the same exact text right here, because only one is displayed at the end of the day. Now there's one more thing that we have to do here, and we're actually going to set the layout order of this. And the reason that we're setting the layout order of this is because anytime an achievement is actually completed by the player and the claim reward button is displayed to them, we actually bring that achievement to the top of their list, all the way at the top of the frame, so it's the first one displayed to them. So we're going to say if is completed, then, and we're going to set the layout order to -1 so it appears more towards the top. Otherwise, if it's not completed, then it's going to be set to 0, and it's just going to be displayed along with all of the other ones. Okay, cool. So now that we've created this function, we're actually entirely finished with this. What we're going to do is go back to the create base achievement function, and underneath where we listen for the claim button to actually be clicked, we're going to say if achievement index, then. And what we want to do is we want to call the update achievement function, and we want to pass to the group as well as the achievement index. So now when we create the base achievements, like I said, inside this function, we just do all the very basic handling of this. And then after we do all the basic handling of it, what we then do is if the achievement actually exists, is we then update the achievement to display all of the information that it should now display. And with all that being said, we're almost done scripting the GUI. The last thing that we actually have to do is import the network. So to start working on this, we're going to say remotes.claimAchievement.onClientEvent. Of course, connect that to an anonymous function. The arguments that we're going to get from this is the group, which is going to be a string, as well as the ID, which is also going to be a string. Now, of course, since we're using the state manager, we have to call task.delay, and we're going to wait 0 seconds. Now, inside of here, we're going to create a variable called achievement index. And what this is going to be set to is, again, the get first available achievement index, and we'll pass through the group as well as the state manager.getData. So what we're doing here is we're saying, oh, we just completed an achievement with this specific group. Now we're going to find the next available achievement from the specific group. Now, if the player has another achievement that they can actually complete in that group, then what we're going to do is we're going to call the update achievement function, pass through the group as well as pass through the achievement index. But if the player does not have any more achievements in that specific group to complete, then what we want to do is we want to find the clone of the template for that specific group. So container, find first child, and then we want to look for the child named after that specific group. And then we want to set the visibility of this to false so that the player no longer sees that because they don't have any more quests available in that specific group. So that's how we want to update the GUI whenever the player claims an achievement. Now we'll go ahead, copy and paste it. This time we'll work with the update achievement remote event. So we'll still get the group, we'll still get the ID, but this time we of course want to get the amount, which is going to be a number. And then inside of here, we're still going to get the achievement index, but instead of doing any of this, we're actually just going to simply call the update achievement function, pass through the group, and pass through the achievement index as well, just like that. Cool. And now that we've done that, we're pretty much done with scripting this entire GUI. Now what that means is that we can actually start scripting this on the server side. So to begin doing this, we're going to go inside of the server script service, and we're going to actually add a brand new module script to this. And of course, we'll rename the module script to achievements, and we'll also update the module variable as well. Now inside of here, we're going to want to get the server script service as well as the replicated storage. And from that, we want to get the player data manager script, which is inside of the server script service.playerData. And then we also want to get the achievements config as well. And of course, we want to make a variable for the remotes folder, which is inside of the replicated storage. Now that we've done that, we can go to basically the bottom of the script. We're going to say remotes.claimAchievement.onServerEvent, and then we'll actually connect this to a function, but we haven't created that yet. So what we'll do is we'll create a brand new function called claimReward, which is going to accept a player, of course, which is a player, and the group of the achievements, which is going to be a string. Now the first thing we want to do is actually get the player's profile as usual. So playerData.profiles, index that with a specific player. If we're unable to find the profile, then we want to just stop the function right there. We'll then create a variable called index, which of course is going to be the first available achievement index. So achievementsconfig.get first available achievement index. We'll pass through the group as well as the profile.data. Now, if we're not actually able to find the index, then we want to return n, stop the function right there. We'll then create a variable called ID, which all we're going to do is convert the index to the ID. So get ID from index, and then we'll pass through the group as well as the index. We then want to get the achievement config. So achievementsconfig.getAchievementConfig. We want to pass through the group as well as the index. Now, if we're not able to find the config, then we want to stop the function right there. After that, we want to get the specific player data of that achievement. So we're going to say local data equals profile.data.achievements, and then we want to index that with the specific group, and then we'll index that group with the specific ID. Now, if there is no data there, then we also want to stop the function right there. After that, we'll create a variable for if it has been completed or not. And how do we tell if it's been completed? Well, we say data.progress, and we check if the progress is greater than or equal to the config.amount. Now, if the achievement has not been completed, then we want to stop the function right there because the player is not able to claim an achievement they have not completed yet. And then we want to check if it has been claimed. How do we check if it's been claimed? Well, we say data.claim. And if the achievement has already been claimed, then we also want to stop the function right there because we don't want a player to claim the same achievement multiple times. After that, we'll create a variable called rewardInfo, which is going to be equal to config.reward. And now here's where we'll actually handle the reward. So if rewardInfo.type equals currency, then how are we going to reward the currency? Well, it depends on what type of currency it is. So if rewardInfo.currency equals clicks, then we're actually going to say playerData.adjustClicks. We'll pass through the player. And then for the amount, it's going to be inside the rewardInfo.amount. Now we can go ahead, copy and paste those lines. This time we'll say else if. Now if the currency equals gems, then of course we want to go ahead and adjust the player's gems. And then I'll make one more else if statement here. This time we'll check for rebirths. And if so, we will adjust the player's rebirths. Cool. So now that we've rewarded the player the currency reward, what we'll then do is update the achievement data to set it to actually being claimed. So we're going to say data.claimed equals true. And then finally, we'll notify the player that we've processed this and they have successfully claimed it. So remotes.claimAchievement by our client. We'll pass through the player, we'll pass through the group, and then we'll also pass through the ID as well. And now that we've created this function, we can go ahead and actually hook it up to the network. So what do we want to connect it to? Well, we want to connect it to achievements.claimReward. Now above the claim reward function, we actually want to create another function. This function is going to be called addPoint, which is going to accept a player, a group, an ID, and an amount, which is going to be a number, and that's also optional. Now first things first, we're going to set the amount variable. Now if the amount is already set, then we're not going to update it, but if the amount is not set, then we want to make the default value of amount to be 1. Next, what we'll do is we'll actually get the achievement config. So achievements config.getAchievement config. We'll pass through the group as well as the ID. Now if we don't get the config, then we want to just stop the function right there. After that, we want to get the player's profile. So player data.profiles, index that with a specific player. If we're not able to find that profile, then we'll stop the function right there. Then we want to create a variable called group data, which is going to be equal to the profile.data.achievements, and then we want to index that with the specific group. Now for some reason we're not able to find that group, then we want to stop the function right there. And then we'll create a variable called achievement data directly below that. And what we're going to do is we're going to index group data with the ID of the achievement. And if we're not able to find that achievement data there, then we want to stop the function right there. Now that we've gotten the achievement data, let's then go ahead and check if it has been completed. So if the achievement data.progress is greater than or equal to the config.amount, then that means it has been completed. And if it is already completed, then we just want to stop the function right there. Otherwise, if it has not been completed yet, then let's go ahead and actually update the data. So we'll say achievement data.progress plus equals amount. And now that we've updated the progress for that specific achievement, let's go ahead and notify the player of that. So we'll say remotes.updateAchievement fire client. We'll pass through the player, we'll pass through the group, we'll pass through the ID, and then we'll also pass through the achievement data.progress, which notifies the player of the current progress on that specific achievement. Cool. So now that we've created this function, we're not actually going to use this function anywhere inside of the script. This function is actually going to be used by a lot of other scripts, which already handle the logic for how these achievements can be achieved. And now I can easily show you exactly what I mean. So for instance, let's go to the click server script inside of the server script service. Inside of here, we already get the player data manager. Let's also get the achievements manager. So .achievements, and then we'll rename this variable to be achievements manager. Now, along with the achievements manager, we also want to get the achievements config as well. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this again. This time we'll say replicate storage.configs.achievements, and we'll rename this variable to be achievements config. Now let's take a look at our click function. Right here is the code for where we actually add the player to the cooldown. And then after we add the player to the cooldown is where we calculate how many clicks we actually want to reward to the player. And then that's where we handle all of that here. Now we can add the logic for progressing the specific achievement before or after we give the player the specific amount of clicks. It really doesn't matter, but we'll just do it before. So the first thing we'll do is create a variable called achievement ID, and that'll be set to achievements config.get first available achievement ID. And for the group here, we're going to pass through clicks. And of course, for the data, we'll pass through the player's profile data. Now, if the player does have an active achievement of the clicks category, what we're going to do is use the achievements manager. We're going to use the addPoint function. We'll pass through the player. And then for the group, of course, again, it's going to be clicks. And then for the ID, it's going to be the achievement ID. Now, we also have the amount argument that we can fill in here too. Personally, I wouldn't have the achievements affected by the player's click multiplier, but if you wanted to, you could literally just move this code down a little bit. Then you can have the reward variable, and then you can take into account the player's click multiplier when tracking the progress on the specific achievement. But like I said, I'm not going to do that. I just figured I'd show you how to do that. So this is what I'm going to do, and we don't actually even have to include 1 in that because the amount is 1 by default, so I'm just going to leave it exactly like this. Okay, so now that we've implemented the achievement system on both the client and the server, and then we've also even added a way of progressing through one of the achievements, let's go into our game and test this out. But before we do that, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go inside of the star GUI, inside of the achievements GUI, inside of the frame, inside of the container, and for the template, we're going to set it to not visible by default. We'll also set the achievements frame to not be enabled by default as well. Oh wow, turns out I made a mistake like 5 seconds into the video. For the open button logic, the enable property of the GUI should be set to the opposite of the GUI.enabled, so not GUI.enabled. And now that we've done that, we can go back into our game and test this out. Once we get into our game, we can go ahead and click on the rewards button, and as soon as we click on the rewards button, we can actually see the GUI appearing on the right hand side here. Now let's look at the individual achievements. The title of this is Islands Number 1. The objective here is to discover the forest island. Then for the progress, well, it's not done yet. And for the reward, we're going to get 500 clicks. Then if we scroll down a little bit, we can see clicks number 1. The objective here is to click 5 times. Let's go ahead and click. And when we click, we can actually see the progress bars increasing right here as well. Now the reward for this is the plus 10% click multiplier. Then if we look below that, we have basic eggs. And the objective is to open up 5 basic eggs. And the reward from that would be plus 10 pet storage. Now let's go ahead and click a couple more times. And we can see that once we actually complete this achievement, it appears towards the top and the claim reward button appears as well. Now, if we go ahead and click on this, nothing exactly happens because we didn't implement that specific reward yet, but we can also see that the achievement now appears at the bottom of the list with the next achievement in line, which is clicks number 2, and that's for us to click 10 times. So now if we do this achievement, we should get 1k gems, and let's go ahead and actually do that. So now that we've clicked 10 times, we can see we're able to claim this reward. Let's go ahead and claim the reward, and when we've claimed the reward, we can actually see that we did receive the 1000 gems, and now that specific specific achievement is no longer displayed in this frame right here because there's no more achievements of that category for us to complete currently. So that's all working pretty perfect. Now there's a few things that we still haven't done. Like for instance, we didn't implement some of the custom rewards, and additionally, we haven't implemented the way of progressing for our island or our egg achievements. So let's go ahead and do that now. So considering the logic that we used to implement progressing for clicks achievements, we can pretty much take the same logic and apply it for both the egg and the island achievements as well. So let's go ahead and implement progressing for the egg achievements. So we're going to go inside of the egg server script right here, and then I'll copy the achievements manager and config into the egg script as well. Now I'm going to organize this a little bit better, so we'll move the manager down here and the config up here. And now that we've done that, what we actually want to do is go to the hatch function. And again, we pretty much want to scroll to the bottom of this function where we actually hatch the pet for the player. So I'm just going to add the logic to the very bottom of this while loop right here, but we're going to do the same thing that we pretty much did in clicks. So what I'm going to do is just literally copy and paste this inside of here. So we're going to create a variable called achievement ID. We're going to get the first available achievement ID. The group is not going to be clicks. The group will actually be eggs. We'll pass through the player's profile data once again. Now, if the player does have an achievement in this category, what are we going to do? Well, we actually need to check that the egg that we're currently hatching is the egg the player needs for the achievement. So we'll create a variable for the achievements config, which is going to be equal to achievements config, .get achievement config. We'll pass through the group, which is going to be eggs, and then we'll also pass through the achievement ID. Now, if we actually do get a config and the config.egg equals the specific egg that we're hatching right now, then what do we want to do? Well, then that's when we'll actually add the point to the player. So we'll say achievement manager.add point. We'll pass through the player. This time we'll pass through eggs as the group, and then we'll also pass through the achievement ID as well. And now, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, a more efficient way of doing this would be actually before the while loop. So what we're going to do is cut that, and then we'll paste that right above the while loop. So we'll paste that right inside of there. And then when we add the point, we're actually going to use the amount of hatches variable for the amount of points to add to the player. And now with all that being said, we should now be able to make progress when opening up eggs for the specific achievements. And next we can implement progressing for the island achievements as well. So to do this, we're going to go inside of the server script service, and this time we'll open up the islands module script. Inside of here, we're going to need the achievements config and the manager once again. So let's go ahead and copy and paste that inside of here. And now once again, we're going to be basically using the same logic from eggs that we're going to be using in islands. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this logic. Then we're going to go inside of the unlock island function. And after we check the island requirement is where we're going to handle progressing for this achievement. So we still want to get the achievement ID. This time though, the group is going to be islands. So let's go ahead and replace the word eggs in all of those. Now, if we do get an achievement ID, then we want to get the config. And if we do get a config, this time we want to check the island property of the config is equal to the island that we're currently unlocking. And then we'll just add 1 point to it. So we'll go ahead and delete that last argument there. And now this is all pretty much good. The last thing that I would like to do and that I would suggest for you guys to do is actually move the is unlocked check below where we handle the achievement progress. Now, the reason that I'm doing this is because imagine you added achievements to your game after players have already unlocked specific islands. Now, if that's the scenario, imagine the player tries to go back to that island that they have the achievement to unlock. If they go back to that island, since it's already been unlocked, this logic is going to stop the function right there, and it's never going to get down to progressing for that specific achievement. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the player can actually unlock that island first, and then we'll make them progress for the achievement, and then after that, we'll check if the island is already unlocked. And with that being said, we're now handling progressing through the island achievements. Now we have one more thing to do, and that's actually implementing the custom rewards. Now let's actually look at our custom rewards. So we're going to go inside of our achievements module, and inside of here we can actually see our different custom rewards. So we have plus 10 pet storage, plus 25 pet storage, and then we also have a plus 10% clicks multiplier for this custom reward as well. Now the way that we're going to handle custom rewards might be new to you. So just go ahead and follow along, and by the end of it, you should understand why we're doing what we're doing. So in the achievements config, we're going to add a new variable that's going to be called clicks multiplier, and we're just going to set that to a blank table. We'll then duplicate this, and this time we'll name the variable pet storages. Now what these tables are going to hold is actually each of the individual quests which affect the click multiplier or the pet storage. Now below those variables that we just created, we're going to create a new function, and this is going to be called generate multipliers. Now our first argument is going to be called find, which is going to be a string. The second argument is going to be called holder, which is going to actually be a table. Now like I said, both of these variables are going to hold the individual achievements which give those specific rewards. So how are we going to achieve this? Well, we're going to loop through the config. So we're going to say for group, comma, achievements in config do. Then we want to loop through the individual achievements. So for underscore, comma, achievement in achievements do. Then we're going to create a variable called description, which is going to be set to achievement.reward.description. Now, if the description property exists, then again with the description, we want to use the find method on this string. And we want to check if this string contains another string. And the string that we want to see if this string contains is actually the find string, which is passed to this. So if there is a string and we're able to find that specific string within the description, then we want to do something. Now to give you more context, when we actually call this function, the find argument is literally going to be click multiplier or pet storage. So that hopefully helps you understand what we're doing here. Now that we know that this is one of the achievements that we're actually looking for, we want to check if the holder table can be indexed with the group. And if not, then we need to set that to a blank table. And now that we've set that to a blank table, we can create a variable called amount. And now what we want to do is we want to get the amount of the multiplier or the effect from the description string. So for instance, we want to get this 10 number from the clicks multiplier string, or we want to get this 25 number from the pet storage string here. Now, how can we do this? Well, we can actually say string.gsub. And like I said, inside of the reward table, we have that description string. And now what we want to replace inside of the string is all non-digit characters. So all characters which are not numbers. And how can we do this? Well, we can actually do this by using the percent and then D symbol for the pattern. And what do we want to replace them with? Well, just a blank string. So we just want to remove all of the characters from the string which are not numbers. And now that we've gotten that number, what we're going to do is we're going to go inside of the holder. We're going to index that with the specific group. We'll then index that table with the ID of the specific achievement. And we're going to set that equal to the number version of the amount variable. And now we're actually done with creating this function. So what we can do is actually call it. We'll call generate multipliers. And like I said, we want to look for click multiplier. And when we're looking for the click multiplier, we're going to pass through the achievements.click multiplier table. And we also want to do this for pet storage as well. So achievements.petstorages. And now that we've generated all those multipliers, we want to do one more thing inside of the achievements config, and that's actually create the get multipliers function. The first argument of this function is actually going to be the multiplier, which is going to be a string, and that's going to be clicks or pet storage. And the second argument is going to be the player's data. Now we're going to create a variable called holder, which is going to be equal to one of the tables that we created up here. So now if the multiplier equals clicks, then this variable is going to be set to achievements.clicks multiplier. Otherwise, we're just going to set it to achievements.petstorages. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead and create a new variable called amount, which is going to be set to 1 by default. And now we want to loop through the holder. So we're going to say for group, achievements in holder do. And then we want to loop through each of the values inside of that table. Now the key is going to be the achievements ID, and the value is actually going to be the multiplier. So we're going to say in achievements do. And now we want to check if the player has actually claimed that achievement. So if data.achievements, and then we want to index that with the specific group, then we're going to index that group with the specific ID. And then we're going to check if the claim property is set to true on that. And if it is, then we're just going to add the multiplier to the amount. And finally, after the for loop has finished, we're going to return the amount variable. Awesome. So with that being said, we can now implement the clicks multiplier and pet storage rewards into our game. So to do this, we're going to go inside of the replicated storage, inside of the utils folder, and open up the stats module script. Inside of here is where we actually handle the click multiplier. So what we want to do first is get the achievements config. So let's go ahead and grab that. Now that we have that, let's go inside of the click multiplier function. And inside of here, we're going to create a brand new variable, which is going to be called achievement multipliers. And that's going to be set to the achievements config.get multipliers. And we're going to look for the clicks multiplier, and we'll also pass through the player's data. And then all we're going to do is add the achievement multipliers to the multiplier itself. Now, before we add the achievement multiplier to the multiplier variable, we actually have to divide that number by 100. The reason for that is because remember, the achievement multipliers come from the description string. So when our description string says plus 10% click multiplier, that number becomes 10. And if we were to add 10 to this multiplier, that would literally be 10. So to get 10% from the number 10, we have to divide 10 by 100, and then we'll add that value to the multiplier that we're already calculating. Cool, so there we go. We just implemented handling the click multiplier reward. Let's then also handle the increased pet storage reward as well. So to do this, we're going to go inside of the replicated storage, inside of the configs folder, and we want to open up the pets module script. Again, inside of this module script, we're going to need the achievements config. So let's go ahead and create a variable for that here. Next, we want to go to the get max stored pets function. And just like how we did in stats, we're literally going to do the same thing here. So let me just go ahead, copy and paste that directly inside of here. Instead of saying clicks, we're going to say pet storage. And instead of using the player data, we're going to use the data argument passed to us. And for the multiplier, well, we're actually going to use the amount variable here. And this time we actually don't need to divide the multiplier by 100 because we just want to add the literal number here instead. Okay, cool. With all that being said, let's go into our game and test this all out. So hopping directly into our game, let's go ahead and open up our pets inventory. We can see that we're able to store 100 pets inside of here. Now let's go ahead and open up the achievements GUI. To increase our pet storage, we have to open up some eggs. So let's go ahead and open up 6. Okay, now that we've opened up all those eggs, we can see that we're actually able to claim the reward right here. So let's go ahead and claim it. And now if we look at our pet inventory, we can see that we're actually able to hold up to 110 pets. So that worked perfectly. Now I also claimed the clicks percentage multiplier as well. And we can see that when I click, I'm actually getting up to 2.1 clicks per second. And that 0.1 actually shows the 10% increase right there. Now let's go ahead and discover the forest island. There we go. We can claim that reward. And then let's go ahead and discover the Arctic island as well. And now that we've discovered this island, we can go ahead and open up some eggs. I'm going to give myself some clicks so that we can complete this achievement quickly and easily. One more egg to actually complete this. And there we go. We've now completed it. Let's go ahead and actually claim it. it. And now when we look at our pet inventory, we can see we're able to hold up to 135 pets inside of here now. So all the rewards are working perfectly, all the progressing is working perfectly, and that means that the achievement system has been fully set up. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, that's going to be it for this episode. As always, if you guys did enjoy the video or it did help you out, make sure you smash the like button, also the subscribe button, and turn post notifications on so you get notified every time I upload a brand new episode. I also have Patreon if you guys like to support me and gain access to all the scripts and the game file that I made during this episode. There's a link down below in the description, and you guys go and check that out. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next episode.